Hello everyone, today we have the 335D, this is M57 Diesel, and we are doing a valve cover gasket. We've already shot a video on injectors on this same vehicle, so we're gonna do that first part as a digest, and then once we get to valve cover we'll cover a little bit more. If you've ever bought a new MAF, it comes with these kind of covers, so it's good to keep them around just so you can cover it. I mean, not a lot of dirt can get into it while it's sitting, but still protection. So this car has a combination of all kinds of different vacuum connections. So on stock car you have a feed here to the EGR cooler, so you can disconnect it at the T. In general, like once you're getting in here, it's good to plan vacuum line replacement at the same time, just because you have to disconnect so many connections, and factory vacuum lines usually you pretty much have to cut them because they're so solidified on there. This is a mix of factory and silicone and fluorosilicone ones and all that stuff. So we're just gonna disconnect these here because we'll need to be disconnecting it anyway for valve cover gasket. And then we're just gonna disconnect this and move this a little bit out of the way so we can work on the CCV connection first. So we're gonna take this snorkel off too, together with the CCV heater connection and feed in here, just because this tube coming from CCV is part of a valve cover, so we need to get that off, but because it's connected to this whole snorkel, I'm going to pull the whole thing out. There's a E10 Torx, and that bolt doesn't come out. I mean, you could pull it out together with the whole connection. So what you want to do is just pop all of these electrical and vacuum connections out of these, and then also there's two little holders here. Just be careful. Plastic is brittle, dries out from heat, so just be gentle on them. The easiest way to disconnect these little clips for this heat wrap is kind of go inside and then pop this button. I wouldn't pull on it because it just kind of separates it and makes it all kind of messy, but this way it's a nice clean way, and then you can just pull it out. Watch this nipple here, these two nipples on the vacuum accumulator, just because they're very brittle because of heat, so you can snap them quite easily. One thing is, so when you're disconnecting these lines, you could pull them out and put them to the side. For the wastegate feed, it goes down here. There's also a little connection there, so you can disconnect there or cut if you have factory lines. I probably wouldn't try to pull them apart just because they're fused together. This is the compressor bypass feed, so probably just can leave it alone for now. And we're gonna work on this. I like to put a little zip tie here on this clip that connects the CCV connection. Use a little hook just to pull at the other end. The reason being is that if you drop that clip, you'll be looking for it a very long time, and this will kind of assure that it doesn't go anywhere. So just lightly zip tie that. I know that if you've done it many times you probably won't drop it, but for anybody doing this first time, it's probably a good idea. So like that, and then you could pull this clip off. Basically there's a bottom one. So for this connection, what you do is you squeeze this. Usually this connection here is pretty good. Don't pull on it because it's fused here and you can break that off and it becomes basically a European pipe. So just gently kind of nudge it around. There's an O-ring in there that when you're putting back you should lubricate, but otherwise just gently. This one's coming off quite easily because it's been off before. So there you go. And then that's O-ring that I was talking about. You can clean it nicely after and then on assembly, and then put it back together. So we also removed this compressor bypass connection because it's going right through the electrical connection here. This one is a fluorosilicone, so it's pretty easy. If you have a factory one, I wouldn't suggest pulling on it. I would just cut it at the nipple there, and then you're good. Even though it's a metal nipple, they do break off quite often. And then take this is your MAF connector. Take this and kind of loop it around your vacuum pipe so you don't have to deal with it. And then watch this. This hose breaks quite often on the factory vehicles. This one's from Tune My Euro. Great replacement. It's a silicone rubber, so it doesn't dry out and crack. Highly suggested. And then once this e-Torx is off and everything is out, you just gently pull on the whole assembly. It's quite dirty. So this is a spare bracket that everybody's always worried about. It's this guy here, and this is the one that has the vacuum accumulator. It mounts to the head, and it has all of the electrical connections, has all the pressure converters here. All the vacuum lines go through it. So we thought just to show this because it's easier this way. This also has the differential DPF differential pressure sensor on it, and that's probably the hardest piece for factory vehicles. This one's really far. There's not a lot of space to get to this Torx. You can't even put like a socket on it or anything like that. So basically, it's you're grabbing Torx bit and your vice grips and slowly turning this, and it's a plastic screw here, or screw into plastic rather. Now, all electrical connectors are here. These two clips here is for your EGT connectors for sensors, electrical connectors, and then your exhaust pressure sensor gets mounted here by 3 screws, and here your O2 sensor connection mounts here. There's vacuum lines that go through here, through this clip. This is from compressor bypass electric valve that is clipped here. And then, of course, all the pressure converters. What I generally suggest, you can take it all apart. If you're going to change vacuum lines, might as well. Or you can take this whole assembly out and out of the way. A few things need to happen in order to do that. You have to undo this bracket. Some people undo these 3. And then they pull this out and then leave this bracket. But because we're doing valve cover gasket, we gotta take the whole thing off, so may as well. So there's 3 bolts on top, 1, 2, and 3, and there's 2 bolts on the bottom. Some people leave this bolt off. They don't leave it. Some people cut the notch here and then just leave the bolt in there and then tighten and untighten it. I think on this car we don't have this bolt. Here we're going to undo all of the electrical connectors. We're going to undo the bolts to take this bracket off. And then we're going to, now we've disconnected the compressor bypass line, so we can actually pull it out and not worry about the switchover, electric switchover valve vacuum connection. But we have to undo the electric one because it's part of that whole harness. So we're going to do that now, and we're going to show you how we're also, you have a choice with your exhaust pressure sensor. You can undo it at this bracket and leave it alone, or you can undo it at the banjo bolt and then kind of leave it with the bracket. Either or. Sometimes it's good to just leave the banjo bolt alone, just because sometimes they do strip. It depends how tight it was tightened from before, if it's been done or undone previously. It's your choice. I prefer to undo it at the just take the sensor off the bracket and then leave the sensor and the whole connection connected. It's a little bit safer. So what we usually do is just have a collection of small screwdrivers and pick tools and maybe a bit of a little flat head. So we're going to use that. First we're going to undo some electrical connectors. There's really no specific sequence how to do this. So the electrical harness is clipped to the bracket. There's a couple of clips. they're kind of clipped into the bracket, and then sometimes it's easier, instead of pulling it, you can just undo the zip tie and then redo the zip tie when you do it, just because like this one's broken, so they break because they dry out. Like this one is, I think, broken as well, and then this one's broken. You can get them from BMW, but it's just easier to just undo the zip ties. We're gonna replace these anyway, so it doesn't matter for us. Now this big harness is also clipped in here to the bracket, and that kind of undoes that, and then you can undo the sensor connection here, and then next we're going to undo the pressure converters, and we're gonna undo the O2, V, and 2 EGTs here, clips. For the EGT electrical connectors, they're clipped to this bracket as we showed before. There's two of them, one here, one here. So what you do is you take a small screwdriver or a pick tool, and then there's a little clip here. You push it towards the front of the motor and push the whole thing down, and then just unclips like that. I'll show you in a second once I pull it out. So like that. Here, this little clip, it pushes sideways, and then whole thing slides out, and then it's much easier to disconnect them. I think this one is, yeah, I just press it and disconnect like that. And then, so what you're trying to do is you're trying to free up this whole electrical harness. You do the same with this guy here, with the second EGT sensor. I'll push it out. This one's not connected just because it doesn't exist on this vehicle. The other thing too to consider when you're dealing with these things, sometimes these clips here, so this is the O2, it kind of gets routed through these clips, and then you may have to undo some of them. They just come off like this, right? Just off these brackets here, and then there's one over here on the bottom. We may not need it to do it. For the O2 sensor connector slides onto these slides, and then it gets held by these, this one's broken, by the two little clips like that. So what you need to do is gently, because they're brittle, that's why this one's broken, you can just pry these out sideways and then slide the whole connector out. So that's what we're going to do next. Push on these clips gently. It's that far one that doesn't want to unclip. Okay, and then gently on the forward one, the whole connector comes out like that. And then what you could do, becomes a bit of a rat's nest. What you could do is you could just undo it here. It's much easier. Like that. And so what happens is that this whole thing now is held. Everything is undone. All of the connectors here are undone, and it's just held by a connector for the electric switchover valve for compressor bypass. The connector looks like this. It's exactly the same connector as for the EGR cooler bypass valve. So it's got same spring like this, and then a connector like that. And what happens, it's connected like this, so we just need to push the spring and pull it out. So what you do is, no tools required, you just reach with your hand. You can see it from up top here. So this connector, this is a view from sort of passenger side top. This connector, all you do is you press on the spring. You can see it once you take the O2 sensor out and pull it out like that. It's positioned like this. So what you do is you press and pull out. So once all of this out, all disconnected, you take this harness with all of these and just put it to the side here so it's out of your way. And then it's much easier to work. Just kind of flip it there. Now we have two more connectors. We have the dreaded pressure converter connectors. So we're gonna do them next. Just unclip some of these vacuum lines here. This car likes to use lots of Velcro wraps. So just pull the vacuum lines, and then this first one is for the wastegate. We're going to use the Andrew Rodriguez trick. You need a 90-degree pick. Usually these connectors have these little white tabs, so you slide them up. And when you try to press them, it doesn't work. So the easiest is to take a 90-degree pick, pull it under, and you can see it moves, and he does it much easier, but this one's stuck, and pull it out. So that's one. Second one, this is for turbo switchover, same thing. You can see the clip moves, and pull it out. That's it. And then you move this little harness out of the way too. So just a bit of a close-up. These connectors, 4 pressure converters, are on the 2 pressure converters here. One here and then one here. Now the clip itself, as I said, there's little white tabs that usually pull out. If you're gonna work on your car a lot, it's good to just take those tabs out. But what are you trying to do basically is you're trying to pull the 90-degree pick, and you're trying to pull this clip like this, right? You can see it move. So, and then that's what unlocks the connector. So E6 Torx socket. We're going to take the 3 little bolts for the exhaust pressure sensor. That's it. So you kind of make it loose like this. Just watch the line here. Good time to check for this line. Make sure that there's no cracks or holes in it. It's a wear item. Sometimes it breaks and then shoots the raw exhaust on your wiring harness and burns everything up. So good time to check that. So we're gonna do now, take this whole bracket off with the bolts. That's next. Okay, so we're gonna tackle the difficult bolt. As I said, the second bolt on this bracket, as we showed before, we don't have, so we don't need to worry about that. But if you do, you just have to go by feel and find it. It's kind of here, kind of in the middle here. This one is easy, but sometimes you lose it. 10mm bolts, they're like 10mm sockets, so we like to put a bit of a towel there. Start undoing this. It's good to have wobble extensions, so you can just crack it and then go at it by hand. And that's why we need the towel, so we don't lose this guy like that. With these 3, 1, 2, and then 3. When you put these back on, don't tighten them too tight because they got the brass pin nuts in plastic, so it's easy to strip. So what's gonna hold this bracket now is this line, the longest line that is connected to the compressor bypass electric switchover valve. The easiest thing to do, so you don't have to unclip that valve, is to pull this out. But that's not fun. So we're gonna show you how to unclip it. Just watch the sensor, the exhaust manifold sensor. Now what happens, we're gonna do a close-up in a sec. Done all your bolts for this bracket. You gotta watch the exhaust pressure sensor. You can pull this a little bit, but watch this line, these lines. So this is the electric switchover valve. It's clipped to this bracket. This bracket is independent of this bracket. On older cars, this bracket was part of this bracket too. So you have no choice but to pull the whole thing out together. And it makes things complicated. So what do you do? So this clip here, what you do is you try to push it towards the driver's side, slide the valve forward towards the front of the vehicle. And then the whole thing, watch the exhaust pressure sensor, then the whole thing comes out like this. Something's holding it. Ah, forgot. One more thing. I'll show you in a second. What we forgot is that the turbo switchover pressure converter is connected by vacuum line to this big can that is connected to your turbo switchover. We're gonna cut this line because you can do it either at the pressure converter up on the top, or since we pulled this out, we'll do it here, and then it's free. And there you go. Now the whole thing can come out. Then you end up with a rat's nest like this. And good luck putting it back together. So we're gonna cut off the remnants of this vacuum line. The best is to use something like this, not the regular X-Acto knife, and kind of go deep in there and slice very carefully, you know, kind of on diagonal, kind of trying opening it up. This one's a silicone line, so it's a little bit easier. Factory lines, be ultra careful not to, see, it comes in pieces too, not to break that nipple, because you break that nipple, you're replacing that whole vacuum can, or you're epoxying it, and it's no fun. I'm gonna take this bracket off. This is where the compressor bypass electric switchover valve is mounted. That, and the whole bracket just comes out. Very easy.